Hello everyone, another edition of GamerGate Interview. Today we have Thasgar with us. Say hello.
Oh, hi, how's it going? And you could just call me Kevin. That's fine.
Okay, sure. I put your channel in the description below if they wanna check you out. But let's get into the first question, which is, how did you get into GamerGate?
Well, I guess you could say my involvement with this actually predates GG by about 4 or 5 years. Excuse me, sorry. Um, so um, sorry. So basically, I've been part of the secular atheist movement since around 2010, and when that sort of well, basically that fell into two camps pretty quickly, and as a result, I ended up taking this. So, for those of you who are not fully aware, uh, the secular community kind of divided around 2012, 2013 into a more into a feminist camp and a non-feminist camp, and I ended up taking the non-feminist camp, as it turns out. And so I kind of got into GamerGate by following the sort of anti-fem camp, and I'd actually started hearing about, because I had been following Thunderfoot for a while, and I had been watching his videos, and he started doing videos on this person, Nita Sarkeesian, and how she's related to this other person named Rebecca Watson. And then from there, well, I guess the rest, as they say, is history, because I ended up following a bunch of other channels, Internet Aristocrat, Sargon, things like that, who were kind of commenting on Thunderfoot's videos. And and I mean, it just spiraled out of control, I guess you could say, from there.
Oh, all right. I'm just muting myself so I don't interrupt you in any way. And right now, what do you think of GamerGate at the moment?
Personally, I think we're in a good position, but it's a very precarious position. I think for the most part, um, I would argue that as a hashtag movement, it's completed most of its goals. My current stance is that as a per se event, as a chapter in a much greater sort of cultural war, I guess you could say, it's accomplished its objectives. I mean, my perspective has and always will be that GG is a part of something bigger, something that started again in around 2012. It's something that will continue after GG is gone. This could take several years. This could take several years, because what we're seeing right now is um, an intense an intense media campaign. And there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of lies. There's a lot going on. And I think it's essential to say that if things aren't carefully thought out, if things aren't decided carefully, we could fall victim to what the media thinks about us, and basically prove those we've proven wrong countless times right. We could alternatively divide and infight ourselves, as we've seen in other groups before. We could face any multitude of horrible ends, and I, for one, don't want to see that, because I think the stakes are very high, and it concerns me that that today we have, I feel, some very some very obvious problems. Namely, increasingly there's been pretty across the board. There's been pretty lax administration in a lot of groups, in a lot of subgroups of the movement, and they've allowed, in the name of compromise and sort of fear of turning into a sort of counter hug box, they've kind of let these infiltrators in, and they've kind of let these people purport sort of these viewpoints that are meant to be divisive, that are meant to cause argument, that are meant to purport an agenda. And the problem is that many have fallen for this. And I think that vigilance is required. I think that unity is required, but at the same time, I feel that today, um, if a sort of watchdog approach isn't taken to management, if a more laissez-faire approach is employed instead, what's going to happen is there's going to be countless divisions and countless problems, and that's kind of my approach behind Ultras too. I mean, like if we go back forever ago, when Ian Davis founded the Ultras, it was originally as a response to concerns he was having at the time, because even at the beginning, there were people. Sorry, there's going to be noise in the background, but that's something I can't control anyway. But
No worries.
yeah, so I'm just yeah. So it was a response to concerns that already existed in the movement that of infiltration, of disruption, of these very early on and very consistently since there have been these tactics employed um, by our opposition to divide and conquer, as it were. And so early on, the sort of purpose of ultras was to kind of act as a counterbalance against that, and that's a tradition I'm trying to continue as with ultras too, along with the other admins. I'm very privileged to work alongside. The, we can't allow ourselves. I mean, I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name groups that I feel have already succumbed to SJW influence, who have already succumbed to allowing themselves be divided and torn by these tactics. I'm not going to name names, but it's already present, I think, in several prominent groups. And this is something to talk about. I mean, and again, I'm talking mostly about the sort of Facebook front, if it were. I feel like GG is a multi-front group. It's not really an organization. I use the term organization loosely a lot, but I can't speak for a lot of things in places like Reddit, places like 8chan and whatnot. I can't speak for those because I'm not active in those forums. But what I can speak to is when I am active. And today I see a lot of potential cracks. And I think moving forward, what we should do is divide our approach into two things: A, fixing up those cracks, and second of all, I think more importantly, is realize that the time for GG has ended. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's time to go home. What I'm saying is that I think we are going to get, as this is my opinion. This is not a representation of the movement itself, but I think personally that you're not going to get much, like if you're coming into this for journalistic ethics and whatnot, you're not going to get much more in regard to those objectives than already exists. You're just not. I mean, most of the major places are either, most of those people who are opposition on the outset have either been fired, have resigned, or are now members of very minor groups. Leigh Alexander, for example, is a nobody now, and she was a major player at the outset of this. So, not to mention the fact that several journalistic websites now have these ethics policies that they didn't before. So in that regard, our stated objectives are done. However, I've always seen this, as I said before, and I've always seen this as a chapter in a much larger culture war. And I think it's time, and this is again one of the stated goals of Ultras too, is that we're going to move from that. We're still going to incorporate journalistic ethics moving forward. That's still going to be but we're going to move that from a main goal to a side goal. And I think we'll address this in this question a lot better. But what we can do now is we can move away from that very narrow perspective. We can move away now from that very narrow perspective and try to sort of reinstitute a balance, I think, that is missing. We can take those initiatives, we can take those more egalitarian initiatives and fight, and sort of combat those in those other areas. I mean, we're seeing this with metal music right now. There's another hashtag movement as a side that that's very important to look into. Not to mention, the sort of abandoned places before. I mean, I've heard some conversations go on around the idea of returning to atheists, returning back to the secular established himself. I mean, I've heard some, not a lot of consistent talk, but I've heard some talk in the past about going back to atheism and re-examining, trying to, it's like it's a long forgotten graveyard, but going that. So, I mean, and I think, again, I'll address more of this in the next question, but I think right now our goal should be, so GG today should be closing the chapter on journalistic ethics and getting ready for the next chapter, as it were, next section of the greater movement itself. There was stuff before GG and there will be stuff after GG. And so today I think it's time to again, I think I said it best, close the chapter.
All right, I'm just gonna boost your mic a little bit. So, well, just a little follow-up question. Currently, what are you doing within the hashtag? You said you weren't on Twitter. You use Facebook or Reddit or anything?
Yeah, no. So I mean, originally I was highly involved in the because originally we'd done a lot of email campaigns, and I was really focused on that really early on in the movement. Today, because of my schedule, I mean, I was a relative, throughout this movement, I've been doing digging, I've been doing, again, email campaigns, but today my major priority is running the Ultras 2 Facebook group. I mean, this is mostly not out of a lack of passion or a lack of interest, but mostly because of a lack of time. My own personal schedule these days is just ridiculous. So, so right now, the amount of time I can afford to sort of budget out for this movement, I kind of focus on running the Facebook page. So I mean, you can come check us out. We're Ultras 2. I believe, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure the link was put in the description. If it's not, again, it's really easy to find. So I mean, that's really where my efforts are today. In relation to the movement, there's some stuff I do outside of the hashtag, but related to the greater sort of again to the bigger picture. But I know mostly these days I'm focused on, again, the email campaigns, a little bit of digging, and of course the Facebook page.
Yeah, all right. And you kind of touched about this, but what do you think the future holds for GamerGate?
So yeah, when I think about the future of GamerGate, I think of the future outside of GamerGate. I like I said, the major objectives of the movement have been accomplished. It's like I said, you're not going to get much more in terms of journalistic ethics. So that's what I'm saying. The future of it is moving forward. It's time, I think, to there's a lot of concern early on about changing the hashtag, but I think most of that fear was behind the fact that things had just started. Things had just things had not begun to happen yet, and people were concerned that, and rightly so. And I was concerned. I was one of those people concerned that a change in the hashtag early on would divide and separate the movement. But I mean, things change, and there are some people who still stick to those views, and I understand why. They don't want the movement to come to a close. But I think it's important that we put aside that and realize that as a movement itself, GG is but a sub-movement of a much greater thing. Now, this is again my personal perspective, but it's been part of this greater conflict that has happened in the secular community, in the internet secular community, for the past 5 years. I mean, where we are today is that we have built up an excellent community with excellent resources. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this hashtag movement is proof that, not necessarily proof, but this movement has been the most successful resistance to SJW influence that has ever come to pass. The mainstream media was overthrown by your sort of quote unquote normie society. It felt atheism. It's done a lot of damage. But what GG has done that no one else has done hitherto was stand up, say no, and prove that an organized resistance to the sort of corrupting influence can be built. That a group can come together, that a large group can come together, it can accumulate resources, that it can prove a fight against it. And I think What we shouldn't do is abandon everything we've built. We've built so much. We've built websites, we've built communities, and what we should do now is we should take these resources we've built. Now that we've won this battle, like GamerGate is Agincourt. The battle is the 100. The war is the greater conflict between the English and French, the 100 Years' War. So yes, we've won at Agincourt. We've done an excellent job. But where we should go from here now is we should fight in other battlefields, fight further on in the war. Because if we linger here and we say, okay, yeah, we've won this battle, I think it's time to just kick up our feet and say that's the end of it. We just go home now, and that's the end of it. And if some people want to do that, that's fine. But I think those who are still interested in pursuing the greater conflict, those who are interested in seeing more activism, their priority, I think, should be to gather around, gather the resources, gather the tools, gather the community that we've built so far. Use that as leverage. Use that as a springboard into greater and more important aspects of the conflict.
Would you say it's GamerGate has become a watchdog at this point?
I would argue it has been. I would also argue that, again, my view on GG in general is that it's the first and most successful resistance built up against this tide of quote unquote feminists and this SJW mentality that kind of acts like a crusade, that acts like an inquisition. It's the first major stand up against those things, and I would argue that today, with those more concerned with journalistic ethics and our people who are primarily concerned with journalistic ethics, those elements of the movement now, while still in its heart, see, the thing is, like, GamerGate will always be a part of the greater movement because it will always be, like you said, a watchdog on games journalism. Because we're not going to forget, let's say 2-3 years, it's not that we're going to abandon ethics, not we're going to abandon journalistic ethics and abandon video games altogether. No, because it's part and parcel of the movement. Let's say 2 years from now, we're off in some, unseen, unforeseen battlefield, as it were. We're still going to keep that in the back of our minds, no matter where we are. I think the movement as a whole, maybe individual members will forget, but as a whole, we'll never forget this. It will always be a part of our identity, I think. So I don't think, I think we are absolutely a watchdog. I think there's definitely always going to be that watchdog element to the movement, and that's going to stay on forever. I mean, I might be wrong, but I honestly think that because it's such an integral element of the movement, that it'll always be a part of it.
All right, and the last official question for me before we go to the chat is, what would you improve or change in GamerGate, and what do you think it's doing right?
We'll start with what it's doing right. As a whole, the movement has sort of avoided many of the mistakes that other movements have. A lot of other sort of social, first thing they did right was, first thing we've done right is we've gone across multiple platforms: Reddit, originally 4chan, now 8chan, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We've gone everywhere. We haven't isolated ourselves into one place. I think there's even a small group on Tumblr. There's the amount of places our presence is in is we've leached our way, I guess. To put it a lot less romantically, we've leached our way into a lot of places, and I think that's really key, because what there is, lets our message get known to a much wider audience. And I think second and more importantly is it allows we become like a hydra. You can take us down on Reddit, you can take us down like Newt did on 4chan, but it doesn't matter because the movement is so spread out, because the movement is so diverse in its approaches. You can cut one head off, but two more will take its place. Another thing that's done right is, and I know there was a lot of discussion about this in the past, there was discussion with leadership councils having a president of GamerGate, which was a little bizarre. We've never succumbed to the temptation of creating leaders, because I think most people are aware that the creation of a static leadership only sets yourself up to go back to Hydra analogy. What it does is it kind of fuses all those heads into one, and once you've done that, it's over. I mean, and that's something that that a lot of social movements have succumbed to in the past. A social movement has one of two fates if done poorly. Either it'll dissipate, like say Occupy did, or it'll bureaucratize. And once a social movement is bureaucratized, what it's setting itself up for is stagnation, tyranny, etc. And it's something we haven't succumbed to. What would I like to see improved? My stance on that is that I feel, and again, I can only address what I've seen. Now, I honestly think that our biggest try, I'm going to go back to what was done right, but I think one of the strongest things, the strongest elements of GG is its dedicated core of diggers. There has been excellent research, very rigorous research done on it, but from the sort of limited scope that I see, the core may be dedicated and may do excellent work, but it's still very small. I would suggest the people who are like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to run a YouTube channel. I don't want to post on X, Y, and Z. I don't want to. I want to do something else. Those who are interested, well, find out ways that you can get involved in the movement. There's two major weaknesses. I think that one, there are a lot of people who are just hanging on, who are just lurking around. Now let me clarify that for a second. If you are active in one platform, say Reddit, but you're not active in another platform on, say, Facebook, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who are inactive across all platforms and are just here as spectators. I personally feel that that's something worth suspicion over, because why just spectate? And there are people who are fascinated by the movement, but they don't get involved. And if it's under genuine interest, just a lack of ability, find ways to get involved. Find ways to take action. Because here's the thing: my personal view is that it's I'm just going to come out and say it. It's parasitism. To simply come around to be inactive across all platforms and just watch. Yes, it visually it creates an explosion of numbers, but those numbers are useless. I mean, my personal view is I would rather 24 honest, dedicated people than 2,400 people, but most of those people are just lurkers and hangers-on. So the one element of that, so kind of like to the plebs, I say, be active. Don't just sit around and say and do nothing. Find ways to get involved. Now, I'm not saying that the quote-unquote leadership. Again, as a movement, we have no leaders. That's drilled into our I guess not really our constitution, but I guess our core belief system. But I mean, people who manage groups, people who manage pages. Again, this is addressing most of Facebook, but I'm sure there's elements of it. You can probably address people like people on Reddit and whatnot. People who are quote unquote leaders, people who take on leadership position without any title, without any pomp, without any bullshit. People who are taking on a leadership position. My advice to you is be vigilant and be strong. What I've seen too often is lax leadership. Again, I'm not going to name names, but if you've known me for a while, you know who I'm most critical of. Those people, I would say, grow some balls, grow a spine, do something. It's weak leadership that allows infiltration. It's weak leadership that allows division. It's weak leadership that allows people to come in and just start all sorts of just fights, pushing the SJW narrative into and injecting into discussion. These things are going to undermine us ultimately. So my advice to leadership is be more vigilant about that. Again, there are a lot of people doing a lot of great work. I'm not going to fault those people for it, but it's going to be our weaknesses that undermine us, and that's something we should keep in the back of our heads. It's just strong leadership and active membership going forward. That's going to be one of the best things we can do.
All right, I'm gonna look through some of the questions, and first question is from Jack Pewitt. He was here last time. So, does protected classes inherently create inequality?
Do protective classes inherently create inequality? Well, here's the thing. Like, we shouldn't be focused. So there's a difference between equality and equity. Now, what we want is, and I think this is very important, is that as a movement, we should be a meritocracy. It's not like, with with people who are more communist, people who have more Marxist approach to things, their interest is in equality of outcome. And again, a part of a meritocracy is equality of opportunity, and I think we've nailed that down pretty well. Does it create do protective classes create inequality? Absolutely, but you can't frame that as a negative thing. I personally don't think inequality is negative. This is yes, everyone should be allowed to do what they have the same opportunities. But at the end of the day, not everyone has the same talents, and not all talents are equally valuable. This is why hierarchy is inherent to anything. Hierarchy, there will always be in nature, in human society. There will always be people who are more talented, more politically minded, more social, more ambitious, things like that. There will always be a hierarchy. So protective class does create inequality, but what I'm arguing is that's not necessarily a negative thing. So we need protective classes. We need those sorts of things. But here's the thing: a protective class can't then enforce itself on others. And I think that's where libertarian philosophy comes in. It's like, you can have a protective class so as long as they follow the non-aggression principle, as long as they follow ideas of protection does not mean enforcement. Protection just means it's a lot how it's a fire extinguisher. You hope never to use it, but when there's you would rather a fire extinguisher there to kind of put the fires out than not to have anything at all. But at the same time, you shouldn't be blasting people with that fire extinguisher when you don't like what they say. So yeah, no, absolutely, we need protective classes, but at the same time, the inequality that creates is not necessarily a negative thing.
Right. Next one is I think it's from Ian Davis, the lovely Ian Davis. I think he means people, not boys. But what sort of boys does Kevin think we should avoid?
Well, Ian touches on something I think that's very important. The boys we should avoid. Now, I guess if we want to answer the question seriously, I guess the boys we should avoid. If we want to go into, we can ask questions. Always avoid avoid the aspects of your opposition that just want you dead. Because here's the thing, like, I think a major fallacy we've seen in a lot of these groups is that they're willing, they say, oh, we want to compromise. Oh, we want to have discussions. They want to have conversations with the people. They're looking for a more peaceful solution. And, that's great and all, but you have to realize that we're fighting against irrational ideologues who are fundamentally opposed to our position. Compromise is impossible. You can't compromise with something that actively seeks your death, that actively sees your subjugation, that actively sees you as a threat. You can't compromise with a thing like that. It's like, yes, these people are rational, but at the same time, their ideology makes them like wolves. You can't negotiate with a wolf for your life. You just can't. So the people we should avoid are definitely those. Even if they want to talk, here's the thing. We have to look, and there's always. And it's funny because we're starting to see this more and more now. We're starting to see people jump ship. Randy Harper. I think recently Banana Nazi did. It's like there's some people like, oh, we should give them a chance. We should talk to them. But it's like, here's the thing. And my personal point of view is if they made their choice, they made their decision on the outset. They fought against us, and maybe they're apologizing now. But a month ago, they were calling for our death. They were calling us all to be put into prison. They were calling us terrorists. And yeah, they made up apologies. Never seen the error of their ways. But at the end of the day, do we want those people? Do we want those elements in and around us? And I'd say no. I've said it before. A traitor one way is twice the traitor the other. So it's we can't, so another, more boys we should avoid are the boys who have betrayed or have been cast out or have been, who are decided that, oh, I don't want to be part of the SJWs anymore. I wonder what GG has to say to me. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. If you're going to say, oh, look, I'm on the opposite side. Basically, Benedict Arnold's, we don't need those. Other boys we should avoid. Definitely the infiltrators. I mean, see, the problem with people who come to the groups and are disruptive is you never know for sure, and so you have to kind of reach an Aristotelian mean where on one side you don't want to become an inquisition where you're like, you said X on Tuesday. That sounds like something an SJW would say. I think you're and start declaring people heretics left and right. On the other hand, you don't want to be too lax because then you have disruption and division and whatnot. So things we should avoid are definitely things on those two sides. We should avoid overzealous members, and we should fight. We should avoid overlax. Now I know Ian, he was just doing a joke, but there are some other boys we should avoid, and that is the entirety, word for word, the St. Crispin's Day speech of Henry V. And I think that's actually the most important boy for us to avoid.
All right, I'm gonna look for the next question. Let's see. Do you think we can get more allies out there, and where do you think we could get them?
Well, here's the thing. People, and I've heard this question a lot sometimes. But my always sort of counter question is, who? I mean, we can look for allies of opportunity, but I think at this, I think at this stage we have like, I kind of see us kind of like the Mongol horde. It's like we've got people from every tribe here. We have people who have just come to and from GG. We have people from the secular community who are here since Atheist Plus. We have people from metal. We have people from comic books. We have people from other genres of music. We have people from journalism. We have people from all over. And so I think the people who are interested in the movement are already part of the movement. Allies outside, where you can say people from media outlets. Well, there's David Pakman, and look how that turned out. And then those other potential allies have kind of already been absorbed into the movement. I mean, Puff Summers, for instance, Nero, people like that. So whenever someone asks me, "Oh, we should get allies," where do you think we can get them? My question, is who? I personally don't think there's anyone outside of the movement already who would be willing to ally with us as a movement. So, I mean, our best bet is to sort of absorb other groups, absorb other talent, and sort of help them as they help us. That sort of thing.
All right. Looking through the next question. Let's see. But history will still call us a bunch of terrorists, says Jack Pewitt. Would you agree to that?
History will still. Well, I'm going to answer. I mean, I'm going to first answer that by saying, mainstream history may say that, and we should be prepared for that. But the thing about history is that there's always those who really dig into history, who really dig into the primary sources, if you will. Those who dig into primary sources will see that this is not true. G.J. Meyer wrote a book about the Borgias a couple of years back, and I find it the most interesting because the classical telling of the Borgia history is that they were lustful, murderous, and whatnot. He takes a very compelling account using primary sources that proves they are actually anything but. They're actually kind of saintly for their time, and I recommend if you're interested to find and read that book. So I mean, there will always be, if you examine the primary sources, proof that we are not. But the majority, the mainstream history, again, I think we will turn out like the Borgias. I think we will experience mainstream hatred you will experience a long sort of ice age of disdain. But at the end of the day, what my ideally from my perspective is, we shouldn't be here for we shouldn't be here for glory. We shouldn't be here to create a beautiful legacy of being known as the good guys forever. Ideally, people would be in this movement for material change, for like art. I think, journalistic ethics. You're going, if you're here for a journalistic ethics per se, you're coming here to fight against people who tell the story. So if you're here for a good story, you're not going to fight against the people who tell the story. Is what I'm trying to say. So yes, we're going to have a negative legacy historically speaking, but the primary sources will always be on our side because you can't fudge the truth. So yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, we will be remembered as monsters. We will be remembered as terrorists. But I mean, that's part and parcel of fighting against the mainstream, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's see. And from Polly, there are people outside of GG watching, and they're cheering for us. I managed to red pill a few friends, and they also happen to be atheists. Are very happy what we managed to do.
Sorry, what was the question?
Oh, I think it was more of a statement in the chat.
Okay.
You wanted to address us.
Okay. So yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and this is kind of back to what I was going before. Is we come from? I mean, we have all sorts of people on this, but we have men's rights activists, we have MGTOWs, we have again the red pill community, we have Poe, we have we have all the boards of the trans. We have people who are not interested in trans people, who perhaps we have people from Tumblr, Facebook, YouTube. I mean, we have people from everywhere. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's like the funny thing is we don't preach our diversity. The people who are preaching diversity are pretty much they're block. It's usually San Francisco, middle to upper class. I mean, I know Anita Sarkees is Canadian or not. She lives in San Francisco. So it's this small clique of I guess hipsters who are opposing us, and they have connections within the media, and those connections create this illusion of diversity. But what we've proven is that people from all races, all genders, all creeds, all everyone's here. Everyone's here to sit. So yeah, no, we have all sorts of people, and I think that's probably, that diversity is one of the shining examples I think that we can take away, is that we and because we have all these sorts of groups, we have all these perspectives, and I think that's just beautiful. I think it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. From what was it? Yeah. Yeah, from Leo. I don't know if it's the two M's are supposed to be like Romans, from Leo 60 2004, or if it's just Leo 60 MMIV. Well, anyways, he says, "Damn, the guest really knows his stuff."
Well, thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, professionally, I mean, outside of this, I'm an academic, and and I recognize that there are people. I mean, I guess because I'm a quote unquote real academic, but I mean, I'm not in any STEM field or anything, so I guess that's your metric for a real academic. Then I don't qualify. But yeah, no, I mean, I recognize that there's a rather strong contingent inside the movement that is anti-academic, because they've been spurned so often by places like DIGRA, by gender studies majors, things like that. But I mean, really, if and here's the thing: it's like, yeah, I'm an academic, but at the same time, there's a lot of good books to read. There are a lot of learning. I think is one of the most important. Well, it is the most important thing to the human experience. Because if you don't believe in a God, what's the fundamental point of life? Fundamental point of life is to be happy and to gain skills and to live a fulfilling life. And I think the most fulfilling life you can live is a knowledgeable one. To kind of go back to that Aristotelian and Platonic idea that the ultimate form of happiness is knowledge. So I mean, my advice to anyone would be to just have a passion for learning. Because you don't build up knowledge magically. So it's like, yeah, I may know X, Y, and Z, and that might be more than someone else who only knows X or Y or Z. But that takes time and that takes dedication. So like anyone can do it. Anyone I think can I'm not going to go completely tabula rasa because I do think that other people are born more intelligent than others. I mean, there's just different brain chemistries. But at the same time, I may know X, Y, and Z, but I can't, for instance, pilot a fighter plane. And someone else might be able to. I may not have the manual dexterity to sew, for instance, but someone else might, be very good at it. It's all about, find out your strengths and then apply them to something. So my advice to anyone is just find what you're good at and learn as much about that as possible. But yeah, no, I thank you. Um, thanks for that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Also, just for something you said, Poly said, the only solution of total war is the complete defeat, submission of one side, and that side won't be us. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, I think that's a little too, because even the most decimated thing in history remains in some small portion. Like you will always see an element of even if as a movement we're disbanded, even if we lose, and I'm not saying we will, even if we do completely lose, there will always be people who will say, that's not right. There will always be people who resist. So I mean, to take away from that, even in absolute defeat, even if every single one of us are killed, people in the future will always look back, and I think that's important. It's like, there will always be ruins in this happy city, I think, so, but do I think we'll be defeated though? It's very hard to see at this point in history, how this will go down. I mean, right now, yes, we are absolutely losing, but here's the thing: it's like we've accomplished objectives that no one else could. So it's like the momentum is on our side. So yeah, no, we're on the losing side of the conflict right now, but I'm very hopeful. I think for our future, I'm very hopeful because like I said before, we have built a community, we have built resources, we have built what others have not been able to build. So I'm very hopeful. And again, as long as we address those issues, as long as we address the weaknesses we have, we build upon them, and then we address those minor issues. Going forward, months from now, it's like we may have a crack here and a crack here, but if we seal those up, I'm very hopeful that that in time we'll rebound. And again, the momentum is on our side. We haven't had to make a single compromise, not one. We haven't had to make a single compromise to this date. Knock on wood, of course. And it's almost a year in. Well, others have had to make several concessions to our demands. So I'm very hopeful. So I don't think we'll. If we do completely lose, if we are completely defeated, there will always be people who oppose the winning side. And it might not be in our lifetimes, it might not be in our children's lifetimes. But what's to stop people from the future from looking back, digging into the primary sources, realizing what we did, and then build upon that. So even if we are not ourselves successful, someone in the future will be. Now, that said, I do believe we will be successful because we do have momentum, we do have the flow of history on our side. So all it takes is patience, all it takes is dedication, and all it takes is vigilance in addressing the issues that today befall us. So, I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
Sorry about the background. An aggro is tweeting me on Facebook, and I'm getting kind of angry. So my Twitter is kind of going insane. God damn it! To turn off my goddamn phone. Yeah, I think the chat didn't have any additional questions. Is there anything you want to say before we close this thing down?
Not really. I mean, first I want to thank you for giving me the chance to kind of talk about these things. Then I want to thank chat for the questions, I guess. But again, my kind of concluding statement would be, we're in a good position. We just have to patch up and go forward. We have to expand. We can't limit ourselves. But join Ultras too is what I would say to people. Join us and help us build this. We have a small but dedicated group. If you aren't happy with other groups and the way that they approach things, well, we do things very differently. So come join us. Come see what we're all about. And yeah, just keep on trucking because we've been in this for about a year. and we're doing really well. Who knows where we will be from another year? I think so. Let's remain optimistic and just see how things go.
All right. I put your channel if they wanna check it out.
Yeah, no, the people won't find much on my channel. I'm not really a big YouTube person, but yeah, the link should be there to the Facebook page if you're interested. So just come check us out. I think what I have to say anyway.
All right. If there's nothing else, I would I'd like to thank you for coming and everyone else for watching. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks everybody. See you guys next time. Bye.
Cheers.